At the end of every financial year, we receive a statement from our super fund, and usually they say right up the top what the performance has been for the last 12 months. And then quite often we'll talk to our friends, our colleagues at work, or even see advertisements on the television about other alternative super fund performances. And that topic has me quite interested because, as a financial advisor, I know that the performance of a super fund is very much driven by the underlying investments. And I wanted to look at the top 10 industry funds in Australia because that's where the majority of Australia's retirement wealth is held. And I wanted to look at those industry funds and see how they're actually achieving the performance that they're advertising and compare that as apples with apples against the other funds. So without further ado, let's jump into that. So the first thing I did in this research was look up 10 of the top industry funds in Australia. And I went to their websites and looked at the advertised performance and also what the investment options were for those. So you can see in number one spot in terms of performance, we've got Australian Retirement Trust. They performed about 12% over the last year or so, and they were advertising the high growth option. Right down the bottom here, we've got Host Plus, and it's in a balanced option in terms of its advertising, and they are saying that it returned about 7.8%. In the middle, we've got Australian Super at around 9.29% in the premix balanced option. Now, one of the things that you're probably realizing is that although Australian Retirement Trust came out on top in terms of the advertised performance, it's actually advertising the high growth option, whereas some of the other funds are advertising options with different names. For me, this is a little bit cheeky because I know for a fact that some of these funds are not advertising what is the default option if you sign up with the fund. In other words, if you were to say move your super from your existing fund into, say, Australian Super, then I know because of my experience that that premix balanced option is actually the default. So if you did not tell them what to invest your money in, this is where they'll put it. And this is the return you would have got over the last year or so. Whereas some of the funds on this list are not actually doing that. So it is a little bit cheeky of them to be advertising returns in that instance that are saying more or less that we're better than the other funds from a return perspective without really saying, hey, this isn't the default option compared to what the other funds are advertising. So props to those industry funds that are advertising what the performance was of those default options, as opposed to going for their high growth options, which a lot of people, particularly in the retiree demographic, would not be aiming towards. What I decided to do to very quickly work out which fund I thought might have been performing better on a risk adjusted basis was divide the performance of that fund over the amount of growth assets that it was holding in that advertised option. Now, for those of you who are finance geeks like myself, I haven't done Sharpe ratios or standard deviation calculation. It'll take a long time and probably impossible for me to do that without the required information. But given that most of these industry funds are very large and investing in very similar assets, then I think it's probably a close approximation to what those ratios would deliver. So what are we actually looking at here? Well, what I've actually done, as mentioned a minute ago, is worked out how much performance each one of these funds is receiving for the amount of risk they're taking or the amount of growth assets that they have in their portfolio. And I'm unitizing that across the board. I've added an extra column in here to show you how that movement has affected what I think is the performance of these funds on a risk adjusted basis. You can see Brighter Super comes in up the top and they've moved up a position. Uni Super moved up a couple of positions. Australian Retirement Trust moved down a couple of positions, and so on and so forth. Some of these ones down the bottom here didn't move positions at all. So I guess what I'm trying to do here is compare apples to apples, because there's no point comparing a fund that is 96% in growth assets versus one that's only, say, 70% in growth assets, because clearly one is taking a lot more risk than the other. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that when I was completing this analysis, it occurred to me that not everyone has an industry fund, and nor should they. So I wanted to compare another type of super fund with another type of investment option. So what I did behind the scenes is that I looked at a retail fund. So these are things that aren't industry funds. They may be a step up from an industry fund, somewhere between an industry fund and, say, a self-managed super fund, for argument's sake. And I selected a balanced index option inside that fund. Now, I'm not saying what retail fund that was or what balance index fund I chose underlying that, because I don't want to be perceived to be recommending a particular fund. And to make it very clear, I am product agnostic. I don't care what product my clients use as long as they're getting the end result. But it's horses for courses when it comes to funds and what investment options should be in. So I thought it was fair enough to compare a different option. As you can see in this example, this particular balance index fund I chose is pretty much balanced. It's 50-50. And the performance over the last year was 10.22%. Now, not that I want to throw the cat amongst the pigeons, because I know there's some people out there that think that industry funds are the best performing ones going around, because clearly their marketing teams have convinced people of that. But in this example, if I actually compared the performance versus the amount of risk that this fund is taking, then this one would actually come out on top by a long way. So hopefully you've got a lot out of this video, and now you can look at the performance of respective super funds and analyze how they've actually achieved that performance, as opposed to just taking the marketing team's word for it. You need to actually look at those underlying investments and see whether they are suitable for your specific situation. If you've liked this video, then please like and subscribe. I will be posting more videos just like this. If you have any comments or questions about this video, or perhaps you have a comment or question about another video you'd like me to record, then please post the comments in the below box. You can also click on the link to my website in the description below to find out a bit more about me and how I can help you build your best retirement. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you in future videos.